The United Kingdom is currently the world's 6th richest country, but they're headed for what could be a very serious recession. Food and energy prices are rising quickly, and inflation is up 19%. What could be contributing to Britain's having less buying power today than they did 15 years ago? The UK finds itself in an interesting series of events that have led to their current crisis. Food prices have inflated 19%, with certain products like olive oil, sugar, and eggs rising over 40%. The price of bread has risen 18.9%, and butter has risen 22.7%. This is the highest rise in prices in Great Britain in 45 years, and its cause has a myriad of factors. The value of the food hasn't risen, but the cost of production has. In 2021, after a period of record low gas prices in Europe, prices began to rise as a rapid rebound took place due to industries like travel and hospitality requiring more energy post-COVID lockdown restrictions. By December of 2021, gas prices had risen over 180%, and 28 energy companies shut down operations in the UK, affecting more than 2 million citizens. The war in the Ukraine didn't make energy matters for Britain any better. Conflict between Russia and Ukraine indirectly affected the UK's gas pipeline. Although the UK did not directly receive gas imports from Russia, the fact that Russia was reducing their exports to other countries to support the war efforts caused scarcity and increased gas prices. Prior to the war with the Ukraine, the UK got its gas from Norway, the US, and Russia. However, as a result, they had to depend more heavily on the latter partners. The drastic rise in fuel prices increased the price of farming, tilling, planting, watering, harvesting. All processes of produce farming rely on gas equipment. Farmers aren't really making much of a profit either, as the cost to grow is almost as much as what they're paid for produce, dairy, and meat. The price of fuel also increases the price of transportation and logistics of food, not to mention freezing and refrigeration. The entire supply chain of food production is greatly affected by rising fuel costs. Supermarkets aren't paying enough to the farmers to make it worth their while to produce, and a lot of them simply have stopped producing. Labor shortages, increased costs, and diminished returns all factor into many farmers deciding to stop farming altogether. Rising costs of fuel have led to rising costs of food. Rising costs of food have led to consumers feeling the pinch at the cash register. Not to mention, these consumers feel the pain of increasing energy bills themselves, as the UK Parliament has had to step in and issue temporary annual price limits on energy utilities so that consumers have some form of relief. The UK government set an annual cap of £2,500 or $3,027 to ease some of the strain Britons are feeling in their utility bills, and this relief has become exceedingly necessary. It is reported that 25% of Britons can't afford their monthly bills. Disposable income has dropped approximately 13% on average. And for perspective, consumer prices rose by 11% in October of 2022 in the UK compared to 6.5% in the US. Shoppers in the UK are also faced with shortages. Tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers were in short supply as of the end of March 2023 due to disrupted harvests in northern Africa, requiring industry buyers to spend more on less from places such as Spain. Great Britain narrowly avoided a second consecutive quarter of declining economic growth and what would be the definition of a recession, but that fact is of little relief to businesses and families in the UK. Rises in the cost of living has seen work stoppages and strikes from the medical industry, train conductors, teachers, and various other public sector employees seeking raises. Disposable income dropped by approximately £4,000 or $4,840 per year per household on average in the UK, and it's expected to get worse before it gets better for some 7 million UK residents. Voting to leave Brexit is affecting Britons in ways that we'll expand on later. However, a decrease in trade with the EU has resulted in increased taxes for businesses and consumers as Parliament attempts to reduce its debts. Speaking of debts, the Bank of England has had to raise interest rates 10 times since December of 2021 to ease inflation, making personal and business loans more expensive and less accessible to borrowers. The UK really is in a perfect storm of hurdles to economic prosperity. The past few years have been tumultuous for leadership in Great Britain, to say the least. It seems as though the UK has had a series of bad luck and bad decisions from the top that have had serious consequences all the way down. Their longest-standing monarch has recently passed away, and the UK has been busy coronating their new king. The coronation of King Charles, although a bit of a boom to the UK's tourism sector, cost over $125 million in ceremonies and over $1.36 billion in lost productivity as businesses shut down, and people were given time off for the occasion. Great Britain is also still recovering from the events that led to former British Prime Minister Liz Truss to resign, making her the shortest-termed Prime Minister in British history. Truss made campaign promises to cut taxes and increase government spending to keep the British economy growing. Once in office, she aggressively cut taxes at the top income levels and promised further cuts in the future. The problem was that she didn't announce any plans to pay for these tax cuts and spending, leading to skepticism in the global markets. Foreign investors panicked and pulled their money from British banks, leading to a sharp decline in the value of the British pound and ultimately leading to Liz Truss' resignation after only 45 days in office. The Bank of England has been market correcting ever since, changing the interest rates and aforementioned 10 times since December of 2021. Although Liz Truss's time in office was short and filled with turmoil, their previous choice of Prime Minister and the voting decisions of older Britons have also attributed to the current state of the UK's economy. The UK's Brexit from the European Union has had various detrimental effects to Great Britain's GDP. During the 1980s, under Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, the UK made economic moves very similar to Ronald Reagan's America. The markets were deregulated, unions were busted, and the financial sector thrived. The UK's booming financial sector ultimately led to Great Britain basically becoming the world's banker by the beginning of the 21st century. Around 2008, and when the world was hit with a financial crisis, Great Britain's financial machine came to a grinding halt. Parliament pursued austerity in response, focusing on debts instead of productivity or demand. This resulted in 6 consecutive years of real wage decline, leaving Britons nostalgic of better days. Pundits sought out someone or something to blame for this economic disaster. They put the blame on immigrants, asylum seekers, anyone but the leaders who had actually led them down this road. Older British voters demanded to leave the European Union, and their wish was granted. Leaving the European Union was a bad idea in several ways. Conservative Britons felt that membership in the European Union wasn't providing them with a prosperous economy, protection, immigration control, or effective public services, and voted by nearly 52% for Brexit. Leaving the European Union severed all agreements between the European Union and the UK regarding security, trade, governance, and logistics. The UK is completely on its own. Under the leadership of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Brexit created a volatile stock market for investors. Although London was once thought of as the financial capital of the world, 10% of UK assets have been moved to the European Union, and over 440 financial institutions have left the UK entirely. UK imports from the European Union declined by 30% just prior to the COVID global pandemic in January 2020, and UK exports fell drastically by 45% by this time and had fallen an extra 15% by August 2020. Around 20,000 European Union citizens left the UK, resulting in a massive shortage of workers in the retail, hospitality, and transportation fields. This labor shortage contributed to the energy crisis due to a lack of drivers that could transport fuel into the United Kingdom. Brexit has had its own slew of problems, but another cause for the UK's current economic turmoil is a decision not to automate. Compared to the EU and other developed nations, the UK has invested very little into automation and robotization. For example, there are more hand car washes than automatic car washes, which looks like keeping a human working a job instead of a machine on the surface. But in reality, this is a low-wage, low upward mobility occupation that is actually taking a job away from a robot. Failure to change with the times has led to less than desirable production rates in the UK compared to other nations. And this glut of non-desirable, dead-end jobs, combined with skilled worker unions striking, has led to a labor shortage throughout the UK. The economic future of Great Britain is uncertain, but there are some signs. The International Monetary Fund predicts that British GDP will rise by 1% in 2024 and by 2% over the next 2 years. There was next to no growth in 2023. But the UK was able to narrowly avoid a recession. Great Britain has a lot of work to do to get back to prosperity. Current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak doesn't have a specific strategy for expanding the UK's economy, and the costs of Brexit 3 years ago is becoming more and more stark as time goes on. The National Institute of Economic and Social Research contends that Britain should invest heavily into businesses and infrastructure. Britain's middle class is being squeezed by higher taxes, higher mortgages, and lower buying power of the British pound sterling. In conclusion, Great Britain is facing an unprecedented economic crisis. Rising energy costs have contributed to higher costs of food, which contributes to inflation overall. Bad investments, poor leadership decisions, and voting for Brexit have come back to bite Britons in their pocketbooks. Although their financial sector is stable, the choice to avoid automation and industrialization have helped lead them to their current state of affairs. There's hope for the future, but they're not out of the woods yet. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to stay informed on future The Richest content.